Good morning. Thank you for that. It sounds quiet. Okay. Good morning. There we go. Now my microphone's working. Got it right there. The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will now come to order. At this time, I'd like to ask that all unauthorized persons exit the chamber. Once again, my honor to recognize the distinguished, celebrated senator from the 53rd District.
Mr. President, it's a fabulous day in the state Senate. We appreciate your leadership, and it was nice having the First Lady of the Senate up there with you. It really enhanced your vision, or our vision, for that matter. A moment in time before I get in trouble. In 1892, Coca-Cola was first incorporated. And also from Royston, Georgia, in 1936, the Georgia Peach, I already screwed that up, Ty Cobb was inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Probably our lieutenant governor is in that place too. No, it's in New York. Today is National Corn Chip Day. The senator from the 7th told me. It's very exciting stuff. I hope you're listening. And a journal's been read and found to be correct, Mr. President.
Mr. Chairman, when we're done today, remind me to spend some time and figure out how much time you spend to prepare for that. That was impressive. That was very impressive. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? Hearing none, the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. Ms. Secretary, first reading of bills and resolutions. Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 315 by Senator Tippins of the 37th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 8 of Chapter 14 of Title 44 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to mechanics and materialmen so as to provide that a waiver and release of lien and bond rights. Senate Bill 316 by Senator Thompson of the 14th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to professions and businesses so as to provide for military spouses licensed in other states.
Veterans Affairs.
Senate Bill 317 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to county police so as to provide a method
Government oversight.
Senate Bill 318 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to education generally so as to provide for public forums at public institutions of higher education to prevent the creation of
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 319 by Senator Ginn of the 47th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 5, Chapter 5 of Title 12 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to rivers and river basins relative to dam safety.
Natural resources.
Senate Bill 320 by Senator Payne of 54th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 1 of Title 42 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the Sexual Offender Registration Review Board so as to provide for a penalty for
Public safety.
Senate Bill 321 by Senator Huffstetler of the 52nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 34 of Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to physicians, assistants, and others so as to revise
Health and Human Services.
Senate Bill 322 by Senator Ginn of the 47th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 71 of Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to development impact fees so as to authorize the exemption of certain
Economic development.
Senate Bill 323 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to professions and businesses so as to provide patient protection measures for patients undergoing sedation.
Health and Human Services.
Senate Bill 324 by Senator Jordan of the 6th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to medical assistance generally so as to provide Medicaid coverage for pregnant women for a period of
appropriations.
Senate Bill 325 by Senator Karen Shack of the 48th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 17 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to limitations on prosecution so as to revise the statute of limitations for when a corporation may be prosecuted for trafficking.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 326 by Senator Karen Shack of the 48th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 10 of Title 17 and Article 2 of Chapter 3 of Title 35 of the OCGA relating to the procedure for sentencing and imposition.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 327 by Senator Karen Shack of the 48th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 34 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to general provisions regarding labor and industrial relations so as to require
Insurance and labor.
Senate Bill 328 by Senator Jones of the 25th, a bill to be entitled an act to authorize the governing authority of the City of Jackson to levy an excise tax pursuant to subsection B of Code Section 4813. Senate Bill 329 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be titled an act to amend Title 7 of the OCGA relating to banking and finance so as to enact the Motor Vehicle Title Loan Act.
Finance.
Senate Resolution 636 by Senator Rahman of the 5th and others, a resolution commending the special friendship between Georgia and the People's Republic of China and recognizing February 3rd, 2020 as China Day at the state capitol and for other purposes.
Rules.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
Will the Secretary now read reports of standing committees?
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 296 do pass, respectfully submitted by Senator Cowsert of the 46th District Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Rules has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Resolution 538 do pass. Senate Resolution 554 do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Mullis of the 53rd Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendations. Senate Bill 295 do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Anderson of the 24th Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Transportation Committee has had under the consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 159 do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Beach of the 21st Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read bills and resolutions for the second time.
House Bill 230 by Representative Holcomb of the 81st and others, business corporations provide for benefit corporations. That completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, it's now time for our morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? The chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I'd like for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 38th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 38th is excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I would ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 56th for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 56th is excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 26th and the senator from the 15th.
Without objection, the senators from the 15th and 26th are excused. Chair are there any additional motions to excuse? The chair sees none. Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like permission to excuse senator from the 24th for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 24th is excused. The secretary will call the roll of the senators. Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The secretary will unlock the machines. It's now time for our morning devotional. It is now time for our morning devotional. All senators, please take your seats and cease all audible conversations in the chamber. I would ask that our doorkeepers secure the chamber at this time also. All senators, please take your seats and cease all audible conversations. It's now time for our chaplain of the day. Chair would like to recognize a senator from the 6th District to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and to introduce her chaplain of the day.
Thank you. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the pledge to the Georgia flag.
Pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag and to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation.
Good morning. I am honored to introduce Dr. Charles Gardner. He is the senior minister at Atlanta First United Methodist Church and was formerly an associate minister with Peachtree Road United Methodist, a church that's touched so many lives in my Senate district. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech and of Emory, and his work and focus on chronic poverty and its root causes is so incredibly important. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gardner.
Good morning. It is so good to be here again with you this morning, Mr. Lieutenant Governor and Senators, Mr. Secretary. As I was thinking about coming and being with you this morning, I thought about a sermon that I've preached many times. If you're a Christian pastor and you've preached for any particular length of time, you have probably preached about Mary and Martha. That's a staple of most of our repertoires. And generally when you preach on Mary and Martha, there are two different groups of people. There are people who are Team Martha, and there are people who are Team Mary. The people who are Team Martha are the group of people who are the responsible people, who have sympathy and empathy for Martha because she was frustrated because she had things she had to get done because she had a guest in her house. And it just so happens that that guest was the Son of God. So she was busy while her sister Mary was sitting there just listening to Jesus. And to add insult to injury, Jesus kind of scolds Martha for being too busy and being distracted by her many tasks and says that Mary is the one who has the better part. And so I've preached this sermon and I've preached about distractions and how is it that we avoid distractions in our lives and how is it that we avoid those things that take us away from the tasks of every day. I even came across a quote recently, and I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but everything you read on the internet is not true. And quotes you have to be particularly careful of. And I found this one from Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill, as you know, was prolific for the ability to produce quote-worthy lines. But you have to be very careful. There's a historian in Britain named Richard Langworth, and he has written 2 books that are this thick that do nothing but go through all the Churchillian quotes to justify them, to validate them, and to give references for them. So this quote is actually Churchillian. You'll hear it differently, but this is exactly the way he said it. He said, as someone said, you will never get to the end of your journey if you stop to shy a stone at every dog that barks. And shy is an old English word for throw. So you'll never get to the end of your journey if you stop to throw a stone at every dog that barks. And so if everything that distracts us stops us, we'll never get where we're going. But a few months ago, I had the privilege of having a prayer before surgery with a dear friend, and once we had the prayer and he was taken back for his procedure, I was sitting in the waiting room with his wife. As a pastor, one of our responsibilities in that moment is to try to gauge what that family member needs, and often what they need is a silent presence. And for preachers, it's hard to be silent. Part of what we get paid and we're called to do is to talk. And so we gauge that, and often we try to be that silent presence, but it was clear to me that morning that the conversation was comforting to her. I can't tell you really what we talked about that morning. We talked about various things. I remember we laughed several times. And at some point I felt as though she had gotten comfortable and was settled in, and I stood up to leave. And she looked at me and she said, "Thank you for distracting me this morning." As I walked back to my car, those words kind of rang in my head, and I thought about them, and I thought, wow, I've had an epiphany today, is that while distractions can be a hindrance, they can also be holy. Those moments that take us away from those things that sometimes are just too difficult to handle, too difficult to deal with. Another dear friend of mine, Jerry, at one of my previous churches, Jerry, while I was serving as an associate at a previous church, got a brand new puppy golden retriever named Norma Jean. And Norma Jean, he lived close to the church, and he would walk up to the church all the time, and he would bring Norma Jean, and I'm telling you, whatever I was doing, I stopped and I went and played with Norma Jean because she was awesome. And as Norma Jean grew, it became clear that she was a special dog and that she would likely be a candidate to be a therapy dog. So Jerry and Norma Jean went through all the training that you have to do. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but if dogs are going to be in hospital environments, they have to pass a pretty rigorous evaluation. And one of the things is, and this is ironic based on what I'm getting ready to say, is the dogs have to be able to perform their duties without being distracted. And so while they're navigating a course, they drop books, they make loud noises, they do all these things to make sure the dog will remain calm in the midst of chaos. And so now Norma Jean leads a team of 5 different dogs that visited Piedmont Hospital. I saw our doctor in here earlier with the Piedmont lab coat on. And so she goes and she is a distraction in the midst of chaos in the hospital. When someone is ill or not feeling well, she's been to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And if you've seen any videos, when a therapy dog walks in a room, the cares of the world seem to go away from the children that are suffering unspeakable things in those moments. And so this morning, with all due respect to Sir Winston Churchill, I'm going to offer a friendly amendment to his quote. While we may never reach the end of our journey if we stop to throw a stone at every dog that barks, we might just find a little more joy along the way if we stop and seek comfort from the ones that are wagging their tails. Will you pray with me? Almighty God, we stand in this special place. We stand among our leaders who have been called and sent to serve us, and we give you thanks for each and every one here. Thank you for the Lieutenant Governor and his leadership in our state and beyond. And oh God, this morning, there are chances that these senators, as they are about their day, will be distracted from the work here. Some of those distractions will be a hindrance. But, oh God, I pray this day that they might be aware when a distraction is holy and allow themselves to stay in that moment, if just but for a moment, so that they might grow closer to you and each other as together we seek to serve you and our state and our country. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Are there any unanimous consents? The chair hears none. We've got some special guests with us here today. I'd like to ask everyone to take their seats. I'd like to ask that everybody take their seats. Just stand on both sides. All right, so we've got some special guests with us here today, and you know, in elected office, there's all kinds of anxieties that come with that. But I think today I've got a new level of anxiety that shows up when your 9-year-old brings 170 of his classmates down to the Capitol with him. There's a new level of anxiety that arrives around the house, and so I want to give an opportunity for a very special guest, my son, my 9-year-old Ryder Duncan, to introduce some very special guests with us today.
I'm so short. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President and Senators, for this opportunity to introduce some very important Georgians. First of all, I'd like to recognize my fellow third graders from Sharon Elementary that have joined us in the gallery today. Please stand, third graders, and be recognized. Secondly, I have the distinct honor to introduce my principal, Miss Amy Bartlett. Please give her a warm round of applause. Lastly, I can introduce this body being an extremely important Georgian, my third grade teacher, the one and only Miss Robin Ryan. Please give her a huge Senate welcome. Thank you, and I yield the balance to my time to the President of the Senate.
Great job, Ryder. Good job. Come on, Ryder, take a picture. All right, we have additional special guests with us today. Will the Secretary read the resolution?
Senate Resolution 587 by Senator Henson of the 41st and others, a resolution recognizing and commending Morgan D. Wheeler Sr. on his outstanding public service and for other purposes. Whereas in July 2002, Morgan retired for the first time from his position as the Chief Building Official of the DeKalb County Department of Planning and Development, where he served as a supervisor for 28 years. And whereas he is retiring from his position under the Secretary of the State on the State Licensing Board, where he has worked alongside every governor elected over the last 15 years. And whereas, as an active member of his community, he has served on the Stone Mountain City Council and the Stone Mountain Youth Association as both president and coach for over 20 years. And whereas, it is abundantly fitting and proper that the outstanding accomplishments of this remarkable and distinguished Georgian be appropriately recognized. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Morgan D. Wheeler Sr. for his efficient, effective, unselfish, and dedicated public service to the state of Georgia, congratulate upon him the grand occasion of his retirement, and extend the most sincere best wishes for continued health and happiness. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. This time I'd like to call upon the minority leader to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, it's a great honor of mine to introduce one of the people that really make this state work. You know, there are thousands of public servants out there besides the ones that are elected in these two bodies here and across the hall. And a public servant behind me is Morgan Wheeler. You know, he exemplifies the public service. He first was a home builder, and then he got into certifying buildings, a building inspector. And he went out and worked with DeKalb County. He was head of the DeKalb County Inspection Department, making sure buildings were safe for the public and working for the county at probably not as much as he deserved and not as much as he was making in a home builder. He did have that security of a pension as he worried about his family. And then he did that for over 20 years. Then later he went to Walton County and worked there, and he's recently retired from Walton County. He has worked on the state licensing board with the Secretary of State's office and worked over 15 years with that, working with several governors. In fact, when the board was created and standards were implemented in the late 90s, he was one of the founders of that effort on the board. He is married to the mayor of Stone Mountain, and let's give Pat Wheeler, the mayor of Stone Mountain, a hand. And Pat's been around. I mean, when we had the Olympics in Stone Mountain in '96, I know she was mayor back then, so she knows what goes around in our neighborhood. But Morgan is also, besides what he's done in inspections and with the county governments, he has gone out in the community, and he has coached youth sports, he has worked with youth programs, and he has done the dedicated service that we know is key to our strong communities. So I want to applaud him, thank him for his work with Walton County, and applaud him upon his retirement, and hope that he stays on the state board as long as possible. So Morgan, if you want to say a quick word to the Senate.
First of all, the young man that preceded me, he was very polished, and mine, as nervous as I am, I just want to thank the senators, Michelle Henson and Steve Henson, Gloria Butler, and the Lieutenant Governor. And thank you very much for honoring us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to introduce the Doctor of the Day. Calling the Senator from the 44th to introduce our Doctor of the Day.
Where is it? Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, I am delighted today to present our Doctor of the Day, Dr. Todd Smith, who is an orthopedic surgeon with the group Ortho Atlanta and Piedmont Healthcare. He is no stranger to this body. His practice includes orthopedic surgery with a special interest in sports medicine, shoulder, hip, and knee disorders, fracture care, and arthritic joint reconstruction. We are just delighted to have him come back to the Senate and be our Doctor of the Day. So please welcome Dr. Todd Smith. Also, let me just say that he is also past president of the Georgia Orthopedic Society. He lives in Clayton County and practices primarily in Henry and Fayette counties. And I have some of my colleagues here from Henry County up here because they loved him dearly.
Thank you, Senator. Senators, Mr. President, thank you. I just one minute. I want to take a minute to thank you for your service, your hard work, your commitment, your instruction to the citizens of Georgia. I'm happy to spend a day with you today, serving with our nurse at the medical station. On behalf of the Medical Association of Georgia and the Georgia Orthopedic Society, I hope you're all well, but I'm around all day and we're here every day. So thank you very much.
Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. My fellow senators, I wanted to draw attention today to a story I've shared with many of you individually that has shined a light on a glaring hole in our state law. When we were out of session, I was alerted by an attorney friend who was alerted by the Burt Show about this gap in our law. And I don't know if y'all know, but I'm an attorney, and I'm also a former federal prosecutor. When I was alerted to the story of this young woman, I learned that she was serving as a teacher in our public schools. She, like myself, was a young mother balancing her family and her job. And as a teacher, her job is looking after and educating our families. I know that we and all Georgians truly appreciate our teachers, as evidenced by our actions to try to improve our education system, and also by this body giving a much-needed pay raise this last session. So when I heard that this young working mom who's dedicated her career to educating our children and was being denied the ability to pump breast milk during her planning period, taking no extra time from her duties, I was upset. She had a boss who had decided she could not pump and even instructed her to stay late if she chose to pump. The gaps in the current state law meant that this kind of demand is currently allowed, and these gaps must be closed. I'm proud to announce the bipartisan effort that many of you joined in co-signing this bill, which is being introduced today and has been assigned to committee and is known as Charlotte's Law, which is named for this young woman's baby girl. I encourage all of you to support this measure so that working moms across this state and teachers are included in that group, are supported as they raise their families and continue to contribute to our great state and to the education of our families and generations to come. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Call upon the Senator for the 40th. Call upon the Senator for the 40th.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. During a recent visit to my family, my mom was telling me how grateful she is for her Medicare. I half-jokingly said, I wish I could get Medicare too. Then my mother got serious and said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I wish you could too. That's because she has 4 daughters, and we all have very different insurance policies. My mom worries most about my younger sister, who works for a small nonprofit. Her monthly premiums and deductibles are so high, she doesn't have much money left over for office visits. And she's not alone. A Commonwealth Fund study found that 17% of Georgians are going without needed care simply because of cost. Georgians are paying dearly for insurance that doesn't give them the security or predictability that insurance is intended to provide. And we have deceived ourselves in believing that market forces alone will make sure good private plans are available at affordable prices. Instead, the market ends up restricting patient choice by pricing people out of their plans. Some of my constituents had told me that they might not keep their private plans if they had another choice. We should be willing to give them that choice. So, I'm filing today a bill to give Georgians more consumer power and flexibility. It's a Medicaid plan based on the Peach Care for Kids model, a plan people feel good about. In more technical terms, it's a Medicaid public option. This Medicaid public option would allow anyone, no matter their income or their insured status, the option to buy into Medicaid managed care, the same system that Peach Care for Kids uses. They will buy in at the same cost it takes the government to deliver the services. And that cost will be reliable because Medicaid is an efficient and predictable way of delivering health care services. Those who qualify for ACA marketplace plans can use their subsidies to help cover costs. And Medicaid will have to offer one managed care option that is the same as an ACA plan so that as people's incomes fluctuate and they move between Medicaid and ACA, they don't have to change doctors. And with more people going to the doctor when they need to, we can improve overall health in our state and reduce healthcare costs. Even the American College of Physicians, one of the largest physician associations in the U.S., supports a public option for health care. The overwhelming majority of Medicaid recipients are pleased with their health care, just as families are happy with their Peach Care for Kids. Let's give Georgians real options when it comes to paying for and getting value for their health care. Because when a family member is sick, whether it's a mom or a dad or a child, you shouldn't have to worry that you can't pay the doctor because you have both high deductibles and high monthly premiums. A Peach Care public option fills that gap. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Call upon Senator from the 35th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to greet those who are here at the state capitol today to have sickle cell awareness. Every year they come and reach out to all of us for different legislation and just to educate us, because sickle cell disease touches so many people, and many don't know that they even have sickle cell disease because it's disguised with so many different symptoms. As a teenager, I was in ROTC with a young lady who she was tired all the time. And before we finished high school, she died as a result of sickle cell disease. So I've always been an advocate. I've always stood with them, because sickle cell disease is a group of inherited conditions that affect the hemoglobin, a protein that allows red blood cells to carry oxygen to all parts of the body. And of course, the healthy red blood cells are round, and they move through small blood vessels to carry oxygen to all parts of the body. And in the sickle cell disease, the red blood cells become hard and sticky, and they really do damage to the entire body. The disease primarily affects Africans and African Americans and other people of color. And it's estimated in the United States that more than 90,000 to 100,000 Americans are afflicted with sickle cell anemia. And 1 in 500 U.S. African American births is affected with sickle cell anemia. And so that estimates shows that 97% or more of Georgia newborns with sickle cell disease are Black or African American, and roughly 2% overall are of Hispanic American descent. This means that about 1 out of every 295 African American babies born in Georgia from 2004 to 2008 had some form of sickle cell disease. Let us find a cure. Let us find a way to help these people who are contracted with sickle cell disease. So we welcome all of you who have come today to the state capitol, and please, we will continue to talk to you, and please continue to educate us on this. Mr. President, I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. At this time, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege of my own. We have a group in the gallery, Together Georgia. Would you please stand? Give them a warm Senate welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Together Georgia provides health care, adoption services, mentoring, foster care services, maternity services for our most vulnerable populations, and many, many child services. And we're very grateful for the contributions they make to the well-being and the quality of life of our most vulnerable citizens. Thank you very, very much for being here. You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there no objection to the adoption of the resolutions of the consent calendar? The chair hears none. The resolutions of the consent calendar are adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? I recognize the majority leader. I recognize the majority leader.
Mr. President, this is a record. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 o'clock on Thursday, January 30th, 2020.
I've noticed that people have been asking for more efficiency in government, and we're going to give it to them, baby. Mr. Secretary, will you read the announcements?
Rules will meet upon adjournment in 4:50 cap. Public safety is canceled. Department of Transportation board election for the 7th Congressional District will meet in the Senate chamber at 2 p.m. Education and Youth is canceled. The Department of Transportation board election for the 8th Congressional District will meet in the Senate chamber at 3 p.m. Economic Development and Tourism will meet in 125 cap at 3 p.m. Health and Human Services is canceled. Judiciary is canceled. Retirement will meet in MES 1 at 4 p.m. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'd like to remind all senators to remain for page photographs, please. We have a number of pages that have not had photographs. We want to make sure all these young people get photographs and get their just reward for their labor today. Are there any additional announcements? The majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until January 30th, 2020 at 10 a.m. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. On the motion of the ayes clearly have it. We stand adjourned.